So we had a special pasuk to teach us that even though you marry your sister-in-law, Reuben's wife passes away. Reuben passes away childless. His brother Shimon marries Reuben's wife. But if Reuben's wife happens to be the sister of Shimon's wife, then he is not allowed to marry her. And we have a special pasuk, the word Aleha, to teach us that. And we ask a question. Why do we need a special pasuk? Had it not been for the pasuk, it would seem that we would have assumed that you could marry your wife's sister, because the mitzvah, the positive mitzvah of Yibum, overrides the avera of marrying your wife's sister. So the Gemara wants to know, first of all, where do you know this concept that a positive mitzvah pushes away a negative one? That's number one. How do you know an asay pushes away a license? And number two, this is not just an ordinary license. This is a very strict one. This is chorus. How do you know that an asay pushes away a license with chorus? So first thing Gemara deals with question number one. How do you know an asay does license? And we said we learned it from the proximity excuse me, of the. We learned it from the proximity of the two psukim, the juxtaposition of the pasuk of tzitzis and the pasuk of klein. And therefore we learn out that the mitzvah of tzitzis overrides the avera of klein. So we see that a positive mitzvah pushes away a license. And we said that in Chumash Devarim, according to Rabbi Yehuda, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, we learn out the fact two psukim are together, but it has to be self-evident or superfluous. So the whole Gemara yesterday was talking, where do we find that tzitzis is that the pasuk of klein or tzitzis is extra? And we went through different steps. And finally, we said, according to Rabbi Shmuel, whenever it says beged, material, it automatically means wool and linen. Why does the pasuk have to spell out semer pishtim? That is extra to teach you that it's written there only so you can learn that tzitzis you wear, even though it might be woolen strings and a linen beged, it's klein, it doesn't matter, because the positive mitzvah pushes away the license. So now we're up to the Gemara. Excuse me. The Gemara then asks the question, why do you have to have a special pasuk to teach you that tzitzis klein? According to Rabbi Shmuel, the word beged means wool and linen. And by tzitzis, it says you should put tzitzis on your beged, on your bigdayim, which automatically means wool and linen. So isn't that already a case of klein? I don't need to learn from anywhere else. So we answered, no, it follows Rava. Rava said, it says hakanaf min kanaf, that the tzitzis string should be the same material as the beged. So, so the tzitzis string, excuse me, should be the same string as the beged. But then it says wool and linen. How could it be? So we said that wool and linen, you can put woolen strings or linen strings on any beged, even made out of cotton, for example. But all other materials besides wool and linen, cotton beged needs cotton strings, a woolen beged needs woolen strings, and so on. So we're up to the bottom. You're up to here about 100 Rabbi Shmuel, about 7 lines from the bottom, and we're just reviewing here. If some of you didn't learn it yet. So the Gemara says you want to say that Rabbi Shmuel holds like Rava, but Rava says you can have tzitzis made out of beged made out of cotton, and Rabbi Shmuel holds that tzitzis cotton can only be made out of wool or linen, because beged, according to him, means wool and linen. So how can you tell me Rabbi Shmuel holds like Rava? And therefore you wanted to say, Rabbi Shmuel, less like the Rava. He doesn't hold of Rava. We're 6 lines on the bottom on Daled Amud Beis in Masechta Yevamos. So we need it. In other words, you're right, he doesn't hold like Rava. But still, Rabbi Shmuel holds like the first part of Rava. That is that we would have thought that wool should only be on wool and linen should only be on linen. And therefore, there's no mixture over here of the two. And that's why we need to learn from Klein that you can do both. Ki diuk, I would have thought like Rava's diuk, inference. Hakanaf, min kanaf, obviously, like tzemel, and wool for wool, pish on land for linen. And if you happen to make wool for wool, then color it blue. Who said you can mix woolen strings for a linen beged or linen strings for a woolen beged? Who they can mix? That's why we need the juxtaposition of the mitzvah of tzitzis with the aver of klein to tell you that no, you can have woolen strings on a linen beged. Okay, so the bottom line is we learn out from the fact that the two psukim are next to each other, tzitzis and klein, that you wear tzitzis even though it's a mixture of wool and linen, because the mitzvah pushes away the negative. Asay pushes away the loises. So we're up to that Hey Amid Aleph, the very top line. Says in Gemara Tainach, this makes sense. Rabbi Shmuel. This makes sense according to Rabbi Shmuel. Learns that when it says beged, it means wool and linen, and then you have an extra pasuk. It says the Torah spells out wool and linen. Must be the extra pasuk to teach you to learn from the two. Of the Rabbanim who don't believe in that beged is limited only to wool and linen. So how, and if they hold that you need an extra pasuk, what's extra about the pasuk? Tomorrow saying you're right. Forget tzitzis. We can learn from somewhere else altogether. Nafkalu merosha. We learned a leper. A leper is someone who had leprosy, and then finally the Kohen says the leprosy is going away. So what happens is he goes ahead and he becomes toyer. He counts 7 days. Goes to the hearing. First he has to shave his entire body, and he goes to the mikveh. Then he counts 7 days and does it again, and then he brings his karbanos. Now, when he shaves, the pasuk says, shave all your hair. And then it spells out the hair on your head, the hair on your beard, the hair on your eyebrows. And the question is, if it says all your hair, what do you have to highlight head and eye and beard and all that? So it must be to teach you halacha, something. The time we learned, Roishai, why you have to tell me that you can shave his head. What do you need it for? I'll explain to you why. Because there's an isser involved in shaving the entire head. It says in the passage, it says, you shouldn't shave the edges of your hair. So because you shouldn't shave the edges of your hair. So I would have thought, I would have thought, Mitzvah king. Okay, a Mitzvah has to shave his hair, but there's an Avera of shaving the entire head. So when the Torah says shave all his hair, it means all the permitted hair. And maybe a Mitzvah should not shave the head itself, because now I'll shave the edges of your head. Okay, that says, no, I want you to shave your head. Now there's an Avera involved. There's a big argument when we say that you're not allowed to shave your head. Does it mean only you're not allowed to shave if you leave your hair in the middle and you just shave the edges, then it's prohibited? Or do we say that even shaving your entire head is prohibited, because the fact is it includes also the edges of your head? So this Tana holds that it's considered an Avera, and that's the Chiddush. That even though it's an Avera shaving your head, but if a Torah has a mitzvah to shave all of his hair, he shaves that as well, because the mitzvah pushes away the loises. Because all right, that's how to hold. Equally, we can ask. 1 second. Doesn't prove anything. You know why? Because an essa can push away a loisa, because an essa, the logic is an essa is stronger than a loisa, and therefore it pushes away a loisa. That's how we're learning right now. There's two ways of understanding essa doich a loisa. There's Rashi and Tosfos and Barachas Daf Chav. According to Tosfos, asay is stronger than a loisa, so it pushes it away. According to Rashi, an asay is not stronger than a loisa, but that the Torah says where there's an asay involved, I'm going to remove my loisa. In other words, there's no aver of climb at all when you want to do the mitzvah tzitzis. It's called hutra, became permitted. So, but right now the Gemara seems to be learning that it's a question of which is stronger, and an asay pushes away a loisa because it's stronger. So it's a question you want to learn from Mitzvah, you can't. You know why you can't learn from Mitzvah? Because that's a weak loisa. That is an extremely weak loisa, but an ordinary loisa might be stronger than asay, and it cannot push it away. Now, why is shaving your head a weak loisa? Because there's no prohibition for a woman to shave her head. So this is an avera that applies to half the population. That's a weak avera. But when it comes to the avera of a yibum, for example, a brother should not marry his wife's sister while his wife is still alive. There, the prohibition is on both. She's not allowed to marry her sister's husband, and the sister's husband cannot marry her because she's a sister of his wife. So that's a much stronger law. How do you know that an asay pushes that away? So the mother. You know the law of shaving, she can't love shaving, goes unequal to everybody. So how do you know that an asay can push away a strong loisa? Says, well, you're right. Asim is a kohen. From the next word in the pasuk, it says your beard, shave his beard. The time you learn the kohen his beard, what's his beard? You tolerate shave all his head. Why have to spell out the beard? Because it says one pasuk says you shouldn't destroy your beard, but that doesn't necessarily mean erase. So, but by kohenim it says that they should not shave the beard with a razor. So therefore we say, so the we would have thought because there's a prohibition of the 5 corners of your beard of shaving with a razor. So I would have thought a kohen mitzvah, same thing. If a mitzvah is a kohen, and even though the Torah says you should shave all your hair, but since you're not allowed to shave the corners of your beard, you should leave it out. So the Torah said, no, as a kohen, I want you to shave his beard as well. The mitzvah of shaving of a Matzera, removing his hair, overrides the Avera. So for here you learn that. So they give him nah. So they'll ask me the same question. It's only limited to men and not to women. And we're talking also about Kohanim more limiting. So what are you telling me? So all we know is that I say pushes away a weak license. Someone says, you're right. But now we have two psukim telling you the same thing. From the shaving the entire head, we already know that an asay could push away a weak license. So why do you have to repeat again about the beard? We already know ourselves that a weak license an asay pushes away. So you know why I repeat it again? We have a rule. If you don't really need it for what it's talking about, we'll expand it further. We're going to say that even a strong license an asay pushes away. Otherwise, why would the Torah have to repeat the same lesson twice? One by the hair, the head, and one by the beard. Since you don't need it anymore for a lab that's not equal to everywhere, so therefore place it to an Indian, place it to even a strong lab, and I say pushes away. That's how we learn that. So no one who said maybe it's only limited to Kohanim, but because Kohanim generally are so strict, they're not allowed to go to a cemetery. There's so many laws about Kohanim that it doesn't happen to the average person. Maybe we would have thought that a Kohen shaving his beard with a razor is very, very strict. It's not a weak license, even though it's a limited group, but it's a Kohen. A Kohen is something special. And therefore the Torah needs to tell you that still the Asay pushes it away. We have no extra pasuk to teach you that an Asay pushes away even a strong license. So we go back to the original question. Why would we have thought that a Yavam is allowed to marry his wife's sister? On what basis? When do you know that an Asay can push away a license? So when Vakati eats it, I've never thought, shiny coin, maybe kind of different. However, than a custom say has all this extra psukim. Therefore, I feel maybe even a weak lab, maybe even a lab that's limited to coining, an Asay should push away. Commercial on the Dachi pushes away. Well, you're right. Ela we learn it from? Well, you learn from the law of a Nazir. What about if a Nazir becomes a Mitzvah? A Nazir is not permitted to shave his hair, but a Mitzvah has to when he becomes tired. So and therefore we need to tell you that a Nazir Mitzvah, this pasuk comes to teach you that a Nazir is a Mitzvah, he needs to shave his head. And the Asay, and now a Nazir applies to everybody, man, woman. It applies to everybody. Here we have a good proof that an Asay of a Mitzvah shaving his hair, his head overrides the loisasa that by a Nazir. That's what I want to say. El Asya Meroisha, the Hachtana from the following verse. Time you learn the Roisha, why does it say by Mitzvah his hair in his head? Matamalema, what it is for? You shouldn't use a shaver or a razor on your head. Shamani after Mitzvah of a Nazir, Cain. I would have thought the same thing applies to a Mitzvah Nazir. Tamalema, therefore it says Roisha. It says Roishai, his head. So therefore we see that Asay pushed away a license. Gemara says no. A Nazir is a very weak lab. I'll prove it to you. We know that an Asay, and that's what we're trying to find out the basis, but we all know that an Asay can push away a loisasa. Positive can push away a negative. But if the negative is combined with an Asay, so you have on one hand an Asay, trying to push away a loisasa and Asay together, the Asay cannot do that. They cannot do that. So that's the question. A Nazir has a mitzvah asay to let his hair grow. Godel Yikodel Pera, he has to let his hair grow. So mitzvah asay. There's also negative. The tar loyal he's not allowed to use a razor. He's not allowed to use a razor to completely shave his head. So a Nazir has an asay and a loisasa. And you tell me that a Mitzvah shaves his head. So here, let's learn from here that an asay pushes away not only a loisasa on its own, but a loisasa combined with an asay. And we don't say that. You know why? Because a Nazir is a very weak Avera. Because it's a very weak Avera, therefore, even if the Asay pushes both away, it doesn't prove, has no reflection anywhere else. Now, why is a Nazir very weak Avera? Because at the end of the day, what is a Nazir? A Nazir is a promise. A Nazir is a promise. And a Nazir, therefore, can go to a rabbi and say, you know what? I want to know my promise. We learned the Chagiga, the Dafyud. A Nazir can go in and say, a Nazir, a Neder, I can go in and he can completely annul his vow. So that's a weak Avera. Averas in the Torah you cannot undo, So therefore, a brother who his wife, sister, is now the Yevam. Why would you think he'd be able to do it? Just because by a Nazir we see the Asay pushes away, it proves nothing, because that Avera can unravel. This Avera can't. Says Gemara. Equal, if I can ask you, Malan Nazir Mitzvah, we're not hey Amar Aleph about 5 lines about it. We're still trying to establish how do we know an Asay pushes away license, and you want to learn from a Mitzvah who's a Nazir that he shaved all his head. There's no proof. You can go and annul your entire Naziris. And I'll prove it to you. But you look him up and not so. How did we have a rule? The ain't asay doicha loises asay. We know that an asay cannot push away an asay and a loises. Big argument to Rivo in Chul Nafkuf Memalef and others. How do we understand that? Is the shot that an asay always pushes away the loises, but the other asay, the counter asay, remains, and therefore, how do we know which one to follow? Is that what it means? Or now that the loises and asay are combined together, it pushes away nothing, and you can still get your lashes and all that. Anyway, either way, and I say cannot push both of them away. Now let's live for another ligma minazah. Let's live for another legam another what? And I say does push both away. Nobody can tell me. And another my time legam. You know why you don't live for another? Equal mifrach. We can ask. Sheken yeshna b'shayla. You can cancel your naziris. Therefore, it's weak. So why should we rely on us say pushing it away? Just cancel it. You're talking about here too. Equal mifrach. We can say sheken yeshna b'shayla. Even if you don't cancel it, the whole affair is so weak. That's why that say can push it away. Ella, we go back. So how do we know that? Not say Ella mikra kama. Let's go back to tzitzis. Now you asked the question: if you believe that beged can mean any material, so the Torah had to spell out what kind of climb it is made out of tzitzis, out of wool and linen. How do we know? How do we know then that there's nothing extra? I'll tell you what's extra. Im kain lema kra. Why does the Torah talk? The next passage when talking about tzitzis, it uses the word gedilim tasalucha. Intertwined thread. Should have said tzitzis taslacha, just like in Pasha Krishma we read. It said tzitzis. So why it doesn't tell you the word same tzitzis? Why does it change to gdilim? Gdilim lamali to teach you something. You come and teach you. I could have said tzitzis. I'm using the word gdilim to highlight that what that's something extra here that you could equate to the pasuk of Aklayim and say that just like that when even though there's Klayim, you're allowed to wear tzitzis. And the asay pushed away the list. Saying about again, there's nothing extra. So we need Gedilim to tell you how many strings. How do we know how many strings you need? Nowhere does it tell you to say how many strings we need. We learn out Gedil Lishnaim. Gedil means intertwined. So that means 2 threads. And then it's a Gedilim. So it's like 2 sets of 2 threads. That's 4. And then you put it through the hole and makes it a total of 8. That's how you have 8 strings. I say, and then it says Gedilim Taslucha. In Parsha Shlach it says Psilim. So I say Gedilu Paslevatech. So Rashi explains you tzitzis, a third of it is you have the strings over here. So what we have here, these are the psilim, the loose strings, and this is the psil, and this part here, the section is a gedil. A third of it is gedil, where you wind the string around it, and then the loose strings are called psil. So you need the Torah to say gedil to teach us how many strings and how it's done. Nothing extra. Im kain, okay, let's go back. Let's go to Klein. Im kain, okay, I grant you that you need to spell out wool and linen. Im kain lema kra, let the pasuk say, lay silver shatnez, do not put on shatnez, send with a pishin wool and linen. Okay, of lamali, the word yachdav is superfluous. What if the yachdav? Obviously, that's what Klein is, mixing the two together. Shmamra lefni must be extra to teach you that we should darshan from the 2 psukim next to each other. Says the Gemara, what are you talking about? No. You know why I need the word yachdav? To tell you that it has to be joined together in a permanent way. That only if it has 2 stitches. If you take, let's say, the woolen thread and you put it through a linen garment, you make 2 stitches. That's considered like it's one garment now. But if it's only 1 stitch, it's not considered one garment. And there's no climb there. So we need the word yachdav to teach you another halacha. There's nothing extra here. No, so the one you came. So lichtav rachmana loy silbish. All the Torah had to say was loy silbish. Do not wear semera pishta yachdav. The word shatn is lamali. We already know the word about climb from before. Why do you have to tell us the word shatn? The word shatn is why you introduce a whole new word here. Obviously, the reason why we word shatn is this extra. It's extra to teach you that what tzitzis is different. So we learn halacha of the word shatn. Shatn is made up of 3 words. Achi hey shua, it should be smooth, and tavi, it should be spun together, and venuz, and then you should weave it. The way Rashi learns, Rashi learns that you should have to spin the wool and linen together, and then weave it together. That becomes shatnez. So how do we know that from the word shatnez? One word. So it teaches halacha. Tosfos has a big problem with Rashi, and that is if the only way from the Torah that shatnez is if you spun the wool and linen together in the thread and then you sew. So how is tzitzis shatnez? Tzitzis, we have a linen garment, and then you put strings through a hole, which are wool. That's not shatnez from the Torah according to Rashi's view. And therefore, the way Tosfos learns is The Gemara means that every single string has to be a proper string. So each string is spun on its own. Let's say wool. The woolen string is spun, is combed, then spun, and then it's weaved on its own. And you're weaving that string into a linen garment. That makes it shatnez. And therefore, if you put it in tzitzis as well, each woolen string, the tzitzis is done properly as a woolen string. And now if you put it together with linen, it becomes shatnez. Anyway, so we need to put something extra here. Elakula mishatas nafka. We learn both mishatas. If the Torah only meant to teach you the halacha of shua and tovi, it should have spelled out in 3 different words. Shua. Why did it put it together as one word to teach you something else as well? I didn't use climb. I used the word shatnez. If I want to teach you only halacha, I would have spelled it out. Shua tovi v'nois. I'm putting it together as a word to teach you another. It's teaching you another thing that changes from climb to teach you. Let's learn tzitzis and climb together. You can win tzitzis minute of climb. Says Gemara. Okay, now let's go back to our original question all in the beginning. Okay, great. You're right. Now we know that an asay pushes away loisa from the juxtaposition of the two psukim, tzitzis and climb. But my original question was, Yevama is not just an ordinary relationship. You get chorus if you're going to live with your wife's sister. So that's why would we think that you're permitted? Because asay push away a loisa, but where do you find a precedent that asay can actually push away a loisa that involves chorus, which is so much harsher? Where do you find such a concept that we need a pasuk to tell you, but your sister-in-law is forbidden? How do we know that? So the more now for the next 2 pages, we'll try to work that out. So let's continue. Okay, where do you find a precedent that pushes away a lot with chorus? You need the word allow to teach you that you don't marry your wife's sister. I'll tell you what. Let's learn from the mitzvah milah. Mitzvah milah you do on Shabbos, right? The pasuk says even on Shabbos. So your mitzvah aseh milah pushes away Shabbos. Shabbos you get chorus. No, but Ma'al and Mila is what is you're doing a malach on Shabbos, Chabola, and Chabola is like taking away the neshama, or according to the Rambam, it's like dosh, threshing. Ma'al and Mila shekei nichlusu aleh shalosh esed bris. Mila has 13 different covenants. That's how important it is. And the Ritva learns it's like you have 13 mitzvahs. Mila, you're doing 13 mitzvahs in one go. Then maybe that's why it pushes away a loisa said that has chorus. But we only have one mitzvah, a single mitzvah. How do you know it pushes away? So he goes, okay, what about Korban Pesach? We learned that on Shabbos, you bring a Korban Pesach even on Shabbos. As Asay pushes away a loisa b'karos. So think about it 1 second. Pesach is not an ordinary Asay. Mala Pesach shekin karos. If you don't bring a Korban Pesach, you get karos as well. So maybe they're like equal. Asay of karos pushes away a loisa of karos. But an ordinary Asay like the mitzvah of Yibum, how do you know that it can push away a loisa? Why would you think it pushed away a loisa of karos? So what about Tamid? A carbon Tamid, a daily carbon Tamid is only, you have to bring it. There's no chorus involved there. And yet you do it on Shabbos as well. No, but Malat Tamid, you can't touch it. It's a daily occurrence. So therefore, it's a different kind of mitzvah altogether. Every day you do it, you have to do it on Shabbos as well. What about a mitzvah once in a while? Maybe you can't do it. You can't push away a loisa that is chorus. So you're right. The Chodelas, you can learn from each individual, and they're all different. But Taisim Betat, you want that from 2 of them. So you're okay, which 2 are you going to put together to have something in common and say, look, they can push away a chorus, so too every asay. Hey, Taisi, which 2? If you learn from Mila and Pesach, so they whatever chumrah is in Mila, 13 brisses you don't have at Pesach, so obviously that's not the reason why you're allowed to push away chorus. It's just because it's a mitzvah. If no, she can't chorus. They both have something in common. They both have chorus. Mila also, if you don't circumcise yourself, there's an argument, the Rambam, the Ramban, and the Ravid, whether every day that you didn't mala yourself, you chayiv chorus, or only if you died without a bris, that's when you chayiv chorus. But whatever it is, it involves chorus. Okay, so that's why it pushes away a lois of chorus. But what about Pesach and Tommy? They also have something in common. Okay, so both of them benefit Hashem, and Yevama is for you. How do you know that? Why would you think that I say pushes away a lois that's chorus? Okay, what about Mila, the tummy? What about Mila and Korban tummy? There's no chorus involved in tummy, for example, and it's not and Mila is not for the Eibishter, for Hashem. She can yeshner lifnei hadibur. Both of them have a mitzvah before Matan Torah. Bris Avram already was instructed to a bris, and Korban Pesach in Mitzrayim. They had to do Korban Pesach prior to Matan Torah. So I'm going to say the mandama. Sorry. What about? I'll just get something. And where do you find a Mila v'Tamid?
Not Pesach.
Not Pesach. Sorry, Pesach. We'll get to the second. Mimila v'Tomid. She can yes the Tomid is also for Dibu v'Libud Madomer. We had a chagiga an argument whether the carbon oil that they brought the day before Mat Torah was that the carbon Tomid, was that just an oilless nidava voluntary oil. The Libud the man the Omar, according to the opinion, says oil give yourself midway oilless Tomid. I was oilless Tomid, and therefore we see that Tomid also is prized Mat Torah. Umakul Nami, she can yes and Dibu. All three of them were there before Mat Torah, including Korban Pesach, as we just said. Eli Itzich. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you where there's a precedent that an asay, or at least we thought an asay can push away a loises that has karas. And where's that? Let's learn from the mitzvah of kibbut avei. What do we know about that? The Tanya learned a very interesting in the Brisa. Yochel, I would have thought. Yehei kibbut avei doiches Shabbos. I would have thought that kibbut avei should push away Shabbos. Why? If your parents tell you go ahead and be mechal Shabbos, do something for me which involves chil Shabbos, we would think you listen. It's a mitzvah. Why is Shabbos more important than that? Tamalayim, therefore it says, Ish imay va'aviv tiro, you should fear your parents. The etz shabsai said to Shmoyer, and the same pasuk says, and keep my Shabbos. And the Teisha says, the rest of the pasuk is Ani Hashem, that I am your God. And therefore you have to observe Shabbos. Because Shabbos is all about showing how our allegiance to Hashem, and therefore that overrides all other mitzvahs. Kulchem chayavim b'chaydi, you all have to honor me. Now, what's the case here? My love, the Amalesh chaydi. What did the father tell you? Breaching the Shabbos. Do a malacha, go cook for me, shech for me, basheli, cook for me. Now, we would have thought you should listen to your father. Why? Why would you even think so? I need a pasuk that says this juxtaposition. What do I need it for? Because otherwise, we would have thought that the mitzvah of kibbut avei pushes away the chil Shabbos, even though there's chorus there. Doesn't that show that an asay can push away a loiser that has chorus? The time, because the reason is because the Torah says et shabsai side the shmoyer. Halav hochi, had it not been for that pasuk, then dachi would have pushed it away. Doesn't that prove that an asay pushes away a loiser that has chorus? It had not been for that pasuk. Said no. We know that the Mishnah says in Shabbos of Ayin Hey that how many malachas are there in Shabbos? 40 minus 1. Which is an odd way of expressing 39. Just say 39. So it says the reason why it says 40 minus 1 is because there are 40 malachas, but there's only 39 you get skila. What's the 40th malacha? Mechamer. Mechamer is if you lead your donkey, you lead your camel, and they're carrying things for you. So that's called mechamer. There you only get an avera lav. There's no chorus. So the Gemara is saying, how do we know that the parent and the bishop, when it says in the Brisa here, we would have thought to listen to your parents? You know what it's talking about? It's not talking about they told you to go cook on Shabbos, which involves chorus. They told you go ahead and take the horse and put some things, or the donkey, put some things on it, and take it somewhere else. So that is only an avera, a lav. And that's why we would have thought, listen to your parents. I say doichel, and the pasuk don't. Nothing, but there's no precedent that an asay, not even a havamina, that an asay should push away a lav that has chorus. Says that's what telling you it doesn't push away. So what do we learn? The outcome is that if your parents tell you to be mechal Shabbos or mechamer, don't listen to them. In other words, what are we really learning here? That an asay does not push away a loisus. Because your parents told you to do mechamer, which is only allowed, and yet you say don't listen to your parents. So till now we discussed that I say we brought the pasuk from Klein Mitzitzis. On the contrary, here you have a clear law that I say does not push away loisus. If your parents tell you to lead the donkey, don't listen to them. This you just told me a minute ago that we established a rule that a positive mitzvah pushes away negative. That doesn't happen that way. The Chitem, you can tell me, Shaine Lavi the Shabbos, the Chamidi. You can tell me, no. Shabbos is very different because the whole Shabbos is strict. Because 39 malachas you get killed for, even the lav of Shabbos is stricter than any other lav. And even if you're going to tell me that the mitzvah, I say, listen to your parents, does not push away the lav of Mechamer, has no reflection on any other lav, because this is a powerful lav, and therefore I say can't push away. But an ordinary lav, I say would push away. Like tzitzis and climb. So the Gemara, you're going to try to tell me that shine the lav in the Shabbat, you try to worm your way out and say what Shabbos is totally different, even the lav. The Chamidi is not so, because we are going to learn other dinim if your parents tell you to do other Averis, not Shabbos, and we say those are the parents because we compare it to Shabbos, but you're telling me that Shabbos is different, that Shabbos is stricter than all other Averis. Perhaps other Averis, you should listen to your parents. The mere fact that the Gemara compares all other Averis to Shabbos proves that Shabbos is equal to all other Averis. And therefore, we don't know which, if you're going to learn from Shabbos that you don't listen to your parents, let's learn that I say it does not push away license. If we're talking about mechamer, like you want to argue, then we should learn from here that an asay does not push away licensing. Therefore, I'm telling you clearly that Shabbos is talking about an asay that's a lav that has chorus. Says the Gemara, what am I talking about? Another brisa tries to learn other dinim. But then we learn. I would have thought if a parent says he tame become tame. I want you're a kohen, but I want you to walk into the cemetery to retrieve a certain lost object. The parent is telling you, the father, mother telling you, or your father told you, go ahead and become tamei. I would have thought you should listen. Keep it avain. Or if he says there's a lost object, I don't want you to give it back to that person. It's a big argument when the mitzvah Shabbos Aveda is that only once you pick it up in your hand, or even if it's lying on the floor. The Rambam learns if you see it, you already have the mitzvah Shabbos Aveda, you must return it. So either way, it's talking about either you picked it up already, and the father said, I don't want you to return it, put it back. Or you didn't pick it up, you just looked at it like the Rambam, and the father said, I don't want you to give it back. I don't like that guy. Don't give it to him. Yochel, I would have thought you should listen to him. Each email about the road. So we usually say pasuk from Shabbos. So therefore, what do we see clearly? That Shabbos we are talking about. That even though we're not talking about just a lav, we're talking about the whole Shabbos itself, and what do you call it? We see that if it's talking about lav mechamer, it cannot be talking about lav mechamer because that's an ordinary lav, and we're talking about an asay. We're talking about he told him to cook, he told him to do all these things, and it's a loisei bakara. So l'chayda. Here is a good proof that an asay pushes away a loisei, even though it's karas, because the father told you go cook on Shabbos. Had it not been for that extra pasuk of Ani Hashem, we would have thought you should listen to your parent. So let's learn from here that Nasai pushes away a list with cars. Says he no. You know why we can't? We can ask, Malahana, this is different. Shekain Hechsher Mitzvah. What do you mean Shekain Hechsher Mitzvah? Shabbos is different than Yibum. This is Rashi Pshat. Others have a problem with it, but it's not Rashi lens. When your father or mother tells you, go ahead and cook for me on Shabbos, what they're telling you to do is the Avera. They're telling you to do is exactly the Avera. The mitzvah asay of your father and the loises of Shabbos are clashing because it's the exact same thing. Go ahead and cook on Shabbos. If you want to listen to your father, you must be Machal Shabbos. You have no choice. So therefore, we would have thought in this case, the asay will push away loises, even though there's courage, because the mom is clashing. And the Pasuk says don't. In the case of Yibum, the mitzvah is to marry your sister-in-law. Right? It's an Avera to marry your wife's sister. But there's an option. You don't have to marry her. You can give her chalitza. You can go through the whole process with the boot, as we'll learn later in the Gemara. So therefore, it's not necessary that you have to do an Avera. In this case, who says that we make an allowance that the Asay should push away the lois of the courage when there's an option that you don't have to? So the Gemara is asking, why would we have thought that you have to marry your sister-in-law when there's an option to just give her chalitza? And if you give a chalitza, there's no need to call on to go do the Avera of marrying a sister-in-law. So and you're telling me, no, we would have thought that an asay pushes away a loisisa that has cars even when there's an option. How do you know that? Now, we did learn before in the Gemara, we'll learn later on, the chafal of that, if there's no mitzvah of yibum, there's no mitzvah of chalitza. They go hand in hand. So if you cannot marry a sister-in-law, there's no mitzvah of yibum there because it's forbidden, then there's no chalitza either. Well, you don't have an option. So Rashi therefore holds that this Gemara here argues with that whole principle. I want to quickly touch, and then the Gemara continues on, you'll see tomorrow. I just want to quickly point out one thing to you. Rashi says over here in the example, if your father, the Kohen, tells you, I want you to go into the cemetery and become Tameh to retrieve a lost object. Rashi doesn't say, and bring it back to me. Just retrieve a lost object. Or he says he was not standing in the cemetery, but he said to him, I don't want to return the object to the guy. Now, why am I highlighting this? The Gemara Kedushin we're going to learn like Lama Beis, that when is there a mitzvah of kibbut of aim? Only when the parents have benefit from your act, from your action. And that's what the Gemara says. So how do we understand? What happens if your parents have no benefit? Your parents say, I want you to run around the block. What do they have from that? Nothing. It's for you. Is there a mitzvah of kibbud of aim to listen to your parents then when they personally do not benefit from it? The Rajva writes over there that it is not such a mitzvah of kibbud of aim. Now, how do we understand the Rajva? There's different ways. There's 5 ways of understanding the Rajva. Way number 1 is there's absolutely no mitzvah of kibbud of aim. If they don't benefit, you don't have to listen to them. And the halacha of Shulchan Aruch, the Marik says that if a parent tells the son or the mother says the father, I don't want you to marry that girl, they don't have to listen. Because are you marrying the girl? I'm marrying the girl. There's nothing to kibbud of aim. That's opinion number 1. Opinion number 2 is that when I do something for my parents, it's a mitzvah of the Torah. If they tell me to do something, but there's no direct benefit to them, it's only midrabanan. Third opinion is that it is Mahat Torah even when they don't benefit, but it's a lower degree of kibbud of aim. In other words, that cannot push away a loisasa. But a stricter kibbud of aim maybe does. Fourth opinion is that when the Gemara says it's not kibbud of aim, not that you don't have to listen, it doesn't fall under kibbud of aim. Kibbud is when you're giving them something, mechabed somebody, giving them something, but it falls under the other mitzvah, which is to fear your parents. Fearing your parents is don't go against their commands. If they told you to do something, you got to do it. So that's what the Rajva meant. Not that there's no mitzvah at all. It's an equal mitzvah, but it comes under moira, fearing your parents. Opinion number 5 is there's 2 kinds of kibbud of aim. One that's inherently kibbud of aim, which is bringing them a coffee, giving them something, helping them out. That's kibbud of aim, inherent. You don't need them to tell you. And then there's kibbud of aim where there's no mitzvah of kibbud, but if your father or mother gives you instructions to do something, they just created a mitzvah. If they tell you run around the block, they just created a mitzvah. So in ordinary circumstances, you have to listen to them. It's a created kibbud of aim, you have to listen to them. But where it confronts an avera, then we say to the parents, drop your instructions. So that's the Rashba. But Rashi clearly says here, and the Ritva holds clearly, the Ritva says clearly that if there's no direct benefit of parenting, there's 0 mitzvah to listen. You don't have to listen. But the Rashi says it clearly. What did the parent tell to the son? Go into the cemetery to retrieve a lost object. Nowhere does Rashi say for me. That means Rashi holds, different what I just told you, he holds that even if there's no direct benefit to the parent, there's a mitzvah from the Torah, kibbud of aim as well. Okay, just want to give you a little heads up. Okay, anyway, continue. I hope you